Amo, thank you for joining us today. Do you think, I actually think that this is the case, but you may disagree. I think sometimes disabled people are used as a bit of a punching bag by governments and by politicians who essentially say, well, there's rife abuse in the system. But there is some abuse, isn't there?
There is definitely some abuse. I've been running my charity for nearly 30 years now, and one of the first projects I introduced was welfare benefit support. And like you've just said, Peter, there are genuine disabled people who want to work, and they really do want to work. And there are also some people on long-term sick who, under the Equality Act, would be classed as disabled people too. And they're the ones that I think we're talking about who could end up in this benefit trap. But it's not as simple as the benefit system is too comfortable for them, because a lot of them end up being in food banks. And let's be realistic, nobody wants to be in a food bank.
So tell us about that benefit trap. So if you are a disabled person who can maybe do some work, let's say for the sake of argument, you can maybe work from home, even maybe not the whole time. I have a disabled friend, for example, who wants to work a few hours a week. She has multiple sclerosis. She can maybe work 5-6 hours a week. She'd love to work from home, but getting that work is sometimes quite difficult. But tell me about the benefit trap, that sometimes there are people who have a form of disability. Maybe they want to work even a little bit, but it's very, very hard, I'm sure, to get sometimes the jobs. But tell me about the benefit trap in terms of how that works.
It's really, really complex, because I mean, there's been 2 studies done by the national charity called Scope, which you've all heard of, around the extra costs for disabled people. I was involved in one piece of research which showed that they were £500+ per month worse off. Recently, they did the same research again, and it's now over doubled to over.
Why does it cost more? Look, I know. I remember talking to a disabled woman, a woman in a wheelchair, long-term disabled, who said, "Look, my energy bill is probably higher than yours because when I wash, I have to have more water. I've got to have more hot water. It takes me longer to have a shower than it takes you to have it. You can have a shower in 5 or 10 minutes. For me, it might take 20 minutes. I understand that, but what are the extra costs associated with being disabled? That's just one of them.
The extra costs are that we have a broken social care system. A lot of disabled people are ending up having to buy their own extra care that they can't get through the state. There's stuff like a cushion that they need to sit on to avoid end up having pressure sores. They could, they're not easily available on the NHS. You're talking about 500-600 quid just to buy one of those. Certain types of diet are no longer free on the NHS anymore. People from celiacs, etc., they end up having to pay extra. When it all adds up, and you talked about extra utilities, it all adds up to a lot more money, and you end up in this scenario where, disabled people feel totally lost in a system, a broken system, that like you just said, they want to work. We welcome the idea of working from home. And we've been asking for it long before the pandemic.
So what would you do? Imagine you could wave a magic wand. You've been working in this area for 30 years, Amo. You can wave a magic wand, and you can get the government to fix the system whereby people who need money from the state to live. I totally get that. No argument with that whatsoever. But let's say they can work 10 hours a week. What would you do to make that work for them and for their employer?
To fix the system, I'm going to say something a little bit radical, and some of my peers across the country will probably be nodding when I say this. The assessments for disabled people need to be done by disabled people. They need to be done. I run a user-led organisation. My board of trustees are all disabled people. And therefore, it's in our interest to make sure that our constituent group lives on an equal footing, works, accesses the services the way mainstream society does. But we're having decisions made about disabled people by non-disabled people, and they don't understand what our needs are. So if you go right to the top, even going as far as electing our councillors and MPs, vast majority of them don't understand disability, don't understand what it's like to live with a condition in a certain way.
But you can understand something without experiencing it yourself, can't you?
I do understand. I get you can, but to live and breathe it, it gives you that personal insight yourself. That okay, when I'm making this decision, it's going to affect certain people in a certain way, my peers in a certain way, and so. The thing here, Peter, is that these decisions, these assessments, this whole concept of is this person fit for work or are they not fit for work? If it's done by disabled people's organisations, you'll find those decisions are much more fairer, and they'll end up putting in systems such as the Access to Work scheme, which you may or may not have heard of, are much more swifter. If a disabled person wants to work today, they have to go through, if they actually know about it, the Access to Work scheme. It can take up to 12 weeks before they get an assessment. You know,
that's ridiculous. So you're saying, Amo, I've heard of the Access to Work scheme. I'm not an expert, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on it. But you're saying if someone is disabled, they're saying, let's say for the sake of argument, they're saying I can work 10 hours a week, perhaps working from home, which is a good innovation and helps disabled people get back into the workplace. They have to wait 12 weeks for an assessment to. I mean, surely they can assess whether they can work or not.
Up to, and if you need pieces of equipment to buy, they say that a lot of the time you have to buy it yourself and then claim it back, particularly if you're self-employed. And a lot of disabled people want to get into self-employment as well because it's much more easier for them.
Unflexible, yeah.
Yeah, employers out there still do not, large or small, still do not understand the needs of disabled people, because disability equality training for staff went right off their to-do list when they were making cutbacks in all office suites. So, you know, a lot of them want to go and work self-employed, and to do that, you have to. For example, you can have a certain type of a wheelchair or a scooter purchased through the Access to Work scheme, and some of them to £3,000 to £4,000. But they're saying, well, buy it yourself and then claim it back.
Well, not everybody has £4,000 sitting in their bank account. Let me tell you.
You hit the nail on the head, and that's the problem here. The system's completely broken, and you need to have disabled people's organisations having these conversations directly with decision makers, or making those assessments on behalf of the peers, the constituent groups that they're trying to support.
Amo, really interesting talking to you. That's Amo Raju, who's the CEO of Disability Direct. Thank you. I've got a lot of food for thought there. Reem Abraham is still with us from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Reem, what do you make of what Amo says there?
Yeah, I think